You're listening to the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast with Chicago attorney Dave Scriven-Young. This podcast is brought to you by Anchor, which is the app that I use to record and edit the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast, so let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so that it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 218 of the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast for June 4th, 2020. My name is Dave Scriven-Young, an attorney from Chicago, Illinois, and I'll be your host. This podcast takes you on a daily journey to discover key principles in the areas of marketing, sales, and leadership for attorneys. Now, I find it a little ironic, coincidental, maybe it was meant to be, but the next section of John C. Maxwell's book, Leadershift, is actually we're moving on to a different shift, which is the improvement shift. But it's actually a shift from team uniformity to team diversity. And so, with everything that's been going on in the world and in this country, this could not be a better time. There could not be a better time than to talk about diversity and why diversity is important. And Dr. Maxwell talks about his upbringing, which is mostly a uniformity upbringing. I think it's the same for myself. I grew up on in a western suburb of Chicago, near western suburb, and we did have a little bit of diversity, but mostly white people in my community. Mostly, if not completely, white friends. Went to a Catholic grammar school and Catholic high school where there was some diversity, but not very much. And I played on the hockey team, which was all white. And then went to college, and I guess I had that uniformity frame of mind where yes, there was, I think, an opportunity to incorporate more diverse experiences into my background, but I didn't for whatever reason, whether it was because of my own or because I didn't have the opportunity, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's mostly because I had a mindset where I didn't understand or believe that I needed to hear some outside influences. And it really wasn't until I started becoming more involved in the American Bar Association Young Lawyers Division, that I really started to really open myself up to the opportunities of gaining diverse influences. And that's because the Young Lawyers Division does a tremendous job, I think, in incorporating diverse voices within their leadership, within their appointments. I actually sat through the appointments process a couple of different times in the Young Lawyers Division, and there's actually a process by which we ensure that there's diversity in appointments. So we want to make sure that there's a diversity not only in gender, but also racial, ethnic diversity, also sexual orientation diversity. So we tried as best we could to get diverse viewpoints. And so why is that? What is the reason why you need to have those viewpoints? Is it simply just to include others who are part of a minority, just to make them feel good, just to make you feel good? That may be part of it, but I think the real reason is that a diverse team is actually better than a uniform team. And Dr. Maxwell goes through several reasons why that is. If you have people with diverse perspectives in your life, then you're more likely to have people who will challenge your assumptions. They'll challenge your thinking. They'll show you better ways of doing things. It helps you remove your prejudices. It teaches us to value everyone, and it actually makes us better people to have diverse influences around us. So this is it's a long process. For me, it took what 20, 21, 22 years and more actually to even understand why I needed to have a diverse perspectives in my life. And then, but I'm still, I think at this point, still, fighting through that. I was listening to a conversation on the 10% Happier podcast, a conversation with Dan Harris, and the person that he was interviewing. They were talking about this crisis and the protests and the and everything that's going on. And he said, he often talks about how he's a big meditation proponent. He actually is an ABC News person who got into meditation because of some problems that he was having in his life, and now he's a big proponent. Talks about and has several books on it. But he was saying how in meditation we always talk about how no matter how long you practice meditation, there's always a chance that you will kind of get back into your own head. And that happens, with daily practice, where you're trying to meditate, you're trying to not clear your head, but understand that thoughts will come in, and you see them, and then they go away, and you try to, breathe, and you try to do certain things, but those thoughts will always creep in. There's always a possibility that you're going to go back, and so even though, if your ultimate goal is enlightenment or just to become a better person, maybe even a 10% better person, there's always a chance that you're going to go back and fall back to old patterns. Well, he sort of that was an analogy for him to say it was sort of the same way with keeping a diverse perspective, in that you can always be very gung-ho, especially around this what's going on now. If you're somebody who's wants to join the cause, you seem very motivated, and then maybe after the riots stop, after the protests stop, you go back into old patterns. And so the question is, how are we going to maintain diversity in our lives and not fall back into just a pattern of what we know of maintaining that uniformity? And so there are certain practices that we're going to learn throughout this book, and hopefully throughout our lives, that will keep us from doing that. So what I'd like you to think about today for your daily action item is to think about what lessons you have learned over your life from obtaining a diverse perspective. Dr. Maxwell gives several examples of people who not only, from a racial and ethnic minority, but also, from different walks of life that he learned from. For example, he says a lifelong farmer taught him his greatest leadership lesson, which is that leadership isn't position, it's influence. He learned from an impoverished woman about generosity, and that it has nothing to do with wealth, that you can be generous even without money. A non-leader taught him not to pigeonhole people. So it's just to see that everyone can make a contribution to an organization. A large church leader showed him how to go from to understand how to equip people, and to think like a shepherd who maintains a flock as opposed to a rancher who, pioneers and builds. So all of these lessons that he learned from people who are not like himself. I want you to think about, today, what sort of, what, who, who has come to you from a diverse life, who is a diverse person, who has taught you maybe a significant life lesson. And I've also had, similar experiences with, especially, in the ABA, uh, learning lessons from diverse people. For example, from an African American woman who I worked closely with for a year in the ABA, I really learned how to um, be professional and yet assertive in asserting an opinion in the face of obstacles and in the face of um, in the face of people who did not like her. I really learned a lot about grace and in the line of fire, so to speak, from a gay gentleman that is a friend of mine. I learned a lot about leadership, about communication styles, and how to be a good public speaker, how to be prepared, and how to do certain things along those lines. From another African American woman, I learned, how to communicate person to person, how it's okay to, pick up the phone and call somebody, even though, everything within me says, actually just send them an email or don't disturb them. When you have to communicate with somebody, oftentimes you just need to pick up the phone and do that. So I learned a lot of those things from. I would not have learned those things had I met the people that I met over the years and been involved in an organization that really prized diversity, not only in its membership, but also in its leadership. So, again, for your daily action, I want you to think about who are the people in your life who are diverse, who have provided you with lifelong lessons, whether that's personal life lessons or business lessons or family lessons. Who are those people that have um, uh, provided a perspective that you wouldn't have had otherwise? So we're going to continue on with this topic over the next couple of days, and I really encourage you to join in this discussion. You can leave me a voicemail by going to anchor.fm/attorneydsy. You can hit that message button. You can also leave me a comment for me to play on the show or a question for me to answer. You can also leave me a comment or question on social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at AttorneyDSY. I'm also on LinkedIn. So let me know if you have any comments about this episode. Tell me what you think about this podcast, or give me a topic you would like to hear about. This podcast is on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, TuneIn, and Anchor, so please be sure to subscribe and rate and review. I also want to invite you to the next session of the Lawyers Emotional Intelligence Book Club. We're continuing on with Dr. Chatterjee's book, The Stress Solution. The next session is tonight, Thursday, June 4th at 8:30 p.m. Central. You can find out more at facebook.com/lawyersEQ. Have a great day or night, and remember to fight for the lifestyle that you want and become the rainmaker that you need to be.